late December of 2011, a seasoned hunter ventured deep into New Jersey's pine barrens just before sunrise. He was alone, bundled in camo, rifle on his back, and completely at peace in the place he knew better than most. But within 2 hours he came crashing through the forest, his gear abandoned, his hands trembling, his face pale white. He would never set foot in that forest again. And when he told his story, he left out one small detail, because even he didn't believe it himself. That morning something whispered his name, and then it took his knife. Our story begins with a man named Rick. He was in his late 30s, father of 2, and a US Army veteran with 15 years of experience hunting in the most isolated places on the East Coast. He didn't believe in ghosts, Bigfoot, or anything that couldn't bleed. Rick was methodical. He scouted his routes, he left trail markers, and he always brought backup gear. He was not the kind of guy to get lost or rattled. On the morning of December 28, 2011, he left his house around 4:15 a.m. in his old F-150 pickup. The roads were icy, the air was sharp, but he was excited. The snowfall 2 days earlier made tracking easy, and he'd found a promising spot deep in the New Jersey pine barrens, a stretch of woods that covers over 1 million acres, empty, silent, forgotten. By 5:30, Rick had reached the forest edge. He geared up, slung his rifle over his shoulder and started walking. His destination, a small rise above a game trail he'd marked earlier that year. No cell signal, no service roads, no people, just trees, silence, and whatever was waiting for him out there. At 6:15, Rick finished setting up his camo hunting blind. It was small, one-person tent with mesh windows on 3 sides, and just enough room to sit with your knees bent. He unzipped the flap, slid inside, and settled in for the long wait. The forest was still asleep. The only sounds were wind through the pines and the occasional creak of frozen branches. Every few minutes he'd lift his binoculars, scan the landscape around him, lower them again. Normal. But at around 6:45, he heard something he would never forget. A whisper. At first it was so soft he thought it might be wind through the branches, but the tone, something about the tone was off. It sounded like a voice, like words but not words he understood. He leaned forward, listening more intently. The whisper came again, this time louder, and it was coming from his right about 30 yards out, from behind a cluster of thick cedars. He reached for his rifle slowly, not raising it yet. Then he parted the mesh of the blind, just an inch, and peered into the fog. That's when he saw it. A tall figure standing perfectly still between 2 trees. Thin, long arms, wearing a long tattered coat that brushed the ground. The coat looked black, or maybe dark gray, and it was soaking wet. The head was angled, almost curious. Rick couldn't see the face clearly, just a pale blur, like a mask behind glass. Then the whispering stopped. It turned its head toward me, not slowly sharp, like a bird, like it snapped into focus on me. But I was in camo, inside a tent. There's no way it should have seen me. Rick's mind raced. He raised his scope and looked through it. The figure didn't move, but Rick felt something. Not fear exactly, more like dread. Like he was being watched from inside his own bones. He blinked, and the figure was gone. Not moved, gone. The whispering didn't start again. Instead, something worse happened. A twig snapped, and this time, it was no longer 30 yards away. It was right next to the blind. Rick froze. He couldn't see anything through the mesh anymore. It was too dark on that side. He leaned ever so slightly to the right, trying to adjust his view. Another snap, then silence. He sat completely still, rifle clutched across his lap. Then, he heard breathing. Shallow, rhythmic, like someone crouching just inches from the blind. He could hear fabric rustling, like a coat brushing tree bark. He considered unzipping the flap and jumping out with his weapon raised. But something inside him, something primal, told him not to move, not to make a sound. He stared straight ahead, and then he heard it, the whispering. But this time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was right next to his ear. There was no mouth there, no speaker, but he could feel the breath, cold and wet, tickling the fine hairs on the back of his neck. And the whisper, it didn't sound human anymore. It was layered, like multiple voices stacked on top of each other, speaking backward, chanting, humming. Rick broke. He burst out through the blind, rifle in one hand, gear spilling behind him. In full sprint back the way he made his way in that morning, running as fast as he could back to the safety of his truck. He didn't stop to look, didn't call out, feeling like whatever was out there with him was right behind him. His adrenaline surged. Making it to his truck, he hoped in and tore off as fast as it would carry him. Quilters drove straight home and locked every door. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat on the edge of his bed with the lights on. But the next morning, he felt something worse than fear, curiosity. So he called 2 hunting buddies, told them a watered-down version of what happened, and asked them to come back with him. By mid-afternoon, the 3 men returned to the spot. The blind was still there, slightly tilted. His thermos lay on its side. His backpack, unopened, sat where he left it. But when he opened the front pocket, he froze. His knife was gone. A 6-inch fixed blade, carbon steel survival knife with a leather sheath. He hadn't used it, it hadn't fallen out, it was just gone. As they looked around the area, one of the men noticed something on a nearby pine tree, about chest height. A word carved deep into the bark. Listen. Each letter was sharp, deliberate, slanted like old cursive. The bark around it was peeling, like the tree had died recently. But Rick remembered that tree from just a week earlier. It was healthy, green. Now, it looked like it had been drained. After that day, Rick never returned to the Pine Barrens. He left his hunting group, sold most of his gear, and deleted his old forum account a few months later. But before he vanished online, he uploaded one final file, a 9-minute audio clip recorded from that morning. He stumbled across, captured by a trail cam that was hung on a tree just feet away from his blind. It contains wind, crunching branches, silence, and then, at exactly 2 minutes and 32 seconds, something else. A whisper, faint, fast, garbled. Internet sleuths ran it through spectrograms, slowed it down, reversed it, nothing matched. No known language, no consistent pattern, just something wrong. Like it wasn't meant to be understood, like it wasn't made by something human. Others attacked Rick for making the whole thing up, that he was doing it to get attention and capitalize on it. However, after releasing the recording, he vanished from the internet and never spoke publicly of it again, almost like he wanted others to figure out when he experienced and give an explanation. But a few users recognized something else. The cadence, it sounds like Algonquian chant patterns. Others noticed something even more disturbing, the layering. There were multiple voices, all whispering in different pitches, slightly out of sync. That's not a malfunction, that's mimicry. And that's when a chilling theory started to take hold, with the evidence starting to stack up. What if Rick didn't run into a ghost or a cryptid or a figment of his imagination? What if he met a Wendigo? The Wendigo is a creature from Algonquin legends, tall, emaciated, pale, said to dwell in the deep woods. It mimics voices, whispers to draw people off trail, and feeds on the weak and lost. Descriptions vary, but one element is always the same. It doesn't speak in your language, it mimics it. It copies the sound, the rhythm, but not the meaning. Sound familiar? Some believe the Wendigo is more than myth, that it's not just a creature, but a presence, a curse, something ancient that takes shape wherever wilderness still dominates, and man is alone long enough to hear it. And if that's true, then it didn't just whisper to Rick, it wanted to see if he would listen. Maybe that word carved into the tree wasn't a threat. Maybe it was a warning. Listen, because if you do, if you hear that whisper in the woods, it already knows you're there. Let me know in the comments what you think happened. Also, if you would like me to do a video on the Wendigo, or have another story you would like me to cover, Please leave it in the comments.